I was hitchhiking from Leipzig, Germany to Paris when I emerged from the shadowy woodland. He was a French driver, not very clean, unshaven. Shallow and scruffy, he consented to take me for a spin in his vehicle. A journey with him to Paris, where I had an exhibition to pick up my paintings. October was the month. He appeared to be approximately the same age as myself, 29. His English was shaky. I was not fluent in French. Paul. In all honesty, I had no idea. Who was this guy? It was a blue, sunny, pleasant day. It was a lovely day in France, perfect for hitchhiking, with mild weather. I met him at a petrol station somewhere in France at around 4:30 p.m. I was glad to have found a ride when I got into his tiny, old automobile. We had some small conversations, mostly about my hometown, and then we headed off to Paris on the major route. He opened the glove by reaching across my lap. He produced what appeared to be many passports. Passports were present. He gave me all 4 of them. He claimed that his first attractive woman died after sliding off the back of his motorcycle. He told me that his 3rd girlfriend passed away from a brain tumor, his 4th girlfriend fell off a horse, and his 2nd girlfriend perished in an automobile accident. I acknowledged that he was unlucky and that I was such a bad man. That is when the unease began, and continued to expand as the miles passed. He had 4 young women with him. The man indicated he wanted to take a shortcut to Paris shortly after he showed me the passports. To me, it wasn't a question. Fantastic, I thought. Acquire me get out of here as soon as possible. I thought we would take minor roads past homes and fields and through some pretty French villages, but no. Rather, we veered off the main highway onto a fictitious dirt lane. Oh, I thought. It was bad, but I said nothing. Perhaps because of our poor manners, the reason we remained silent is a mystery. The road initially went through a field in the open. We traversed the characteristically vibrant green French slope, eventually arriving at the dense forest ahead. The path became more constrained. The moment we turned onto the forest road and started driving through the interior of the woodland, the light quickly grew gloomier. The forest appeared to be the ideal location for concealing things. Even yet, I thought the woods were horrifyingly gorgeous. At this moment, my French driver started yelling and speaking in terrible English. I wished to stop speaking in English. This was not a request. Then nothing. Uncomfortable silence in the woodland as it grows darker. A tiny stream of adrenaline began to flow through my body. My instinct to fight or flee was getting stronger. Official communication had now begun. Ended up being very dumb. I thought about this because I knew that as we descended farther and farther into the thickening forest, I would undoubtedly have questions. However, I was aware that I would not inquire. Nothing. The sun was quickly disappearing since it was now 5 p.m. It got darker in the woods. The driver was quite anxious, and I could see he was thinking deeply since I could barely see his lips moving. Was a stiff serpent, much like me, and had reached for the car door handle. I'm positive that there was a movement that was missed. The vehicle remained silent as it decelerated. Was it my time to die? Was there a gun with him? I looked over and over in my mind all these questions. Now my existence seemed unreal. It was not my intention to do this. Perhaps there was a covert method via which I spoke with my kidnapper. Perhaps I released some sort of masculine pheromone that only other males in combat could detect. I had anger management problems, and I wasn't going down without a fight. I was aware that I would neither beg nor plead for compassion to this. And I had my weird cupboard hidden away. That was why I was huge and strong. I've traveled a long way, and nothing can replace my nothing to lose stare. I only offered that. I believe something really basic happened between us at that time. It's a kind of internal calculus that determines if one can defeat, stop, or kill the other person quickly in a matter of seconds, along with all its ancillary factors, such as the least amount of blood, gore strength, and the last dying. These calculations, in my opinion, are not the same when the victim is small, terrified, helpless, and begging. Between those two even humans, it just seems to me to become about power, bloodlust, fear, clawing, and impending doom. The automobile was now traveling quite slowly at 5:12 p.m. I ventured into a weird and unfamiliar realm within myself. Was changed into a potential killer myself with very little prior training. Perhaps my driver could read my thoughts, interpret my intentions from my body language, or see my hand on his filthy door handle. It was a crucial time, and then we began to accelerate out of nowhere. Out of those woods, thank God. It's strange how these memories are returning to me as I type this. I'm not sure about certain memories. Did he mention, for example, that he had to use a shovel to hit a girlfriend because she had attacked him and would not shut up and leave him alone? Were the 2 backpacks on the back seat truly explained by him? Did I not intentionally hear that? Were those words later imagined by me? Did I notice his glove box had extra passports? He got out on the floor. Why didn't I tell you to pull over after the passport was shown? The road widened and we emerged from the shadowy forest into the dusk, with the sun setting and the sky turning a deep crimson and orange. I could see the roadway, and then hear it. Across the highway now, I could see little dwellings. I was unsure about my precise location. I was asked whether I would like to stay the night at the Frenchman's place. We could share a meal for dinner. A brief vision of his vile underground torture room flashed through my mind. My first word after being told not to talk was a courteous no. English sincerely, I believe that my narrative would have ended differently if I had disobeyed the order and dropped anything in the woods. It was all silence in the end. I can be quiet when necessary to think through a course of action. Perhaps one of the passport holder's faces was too scared to overcome her natural shyness and began to speak or plead. Would that have fueled the murderer's gloom? His malevolence? Really, who knows? After pulling off to the side of the road, I watched him drive as night fell. However, since I couldn't communicate in French and believed that my imagination might be overactive, I never went to the police. I shouted something into the darkness, merely perplexed by what had transpired. Now it was completely dark. After that short escapade, I was tired and quickly passed out on the side of the road. I was anxious about what the next day would hold as I woke up. I could still feel life in my hands. Let's fast forward 20 years to a cafe on the boulevard in Leipzig, Germany, where I am teaching English to a German business student. We were talking about hitchhiking for some reason, so I told him my experience. Without delay, my pupil pulls out his smartphone and searches for French serial killers on Google. He then gives me some images. And there he was. A picture of a serial killer was presented to me. Allegra Patrice. That was him and me on that weird date all those years ago. In 1990, there was a suspected serial killer who was dumping the dead of girls on French highways and roadsides, and I could never forget his face. That was when he was in the middle of his killing habit. I was aware that there was a murder afoot. Back then, my French girlfriend warned me not to hitchhike. I've frequently wondered if the murderer. In those woods, there may have been buried women and other males. We moved gently through. Now that I've seen it, I wish I had called the cops. At the time, I was still a college student attending a large party school in upstate New York. Although I wasn't a sorority member, I did frequent the fraternity gatherings. Even so, I regret to say that I went through a big drinking phase in college, but it's probably for the best that I'm over it. My pals Deanna and Kayla wanted to go to an impending frat party. I tended to go out to parties even when I was quite drunk, and I never turned down an invitation. I shared a home off campus with 3 other females. We weren't a team house, sorority house, or anything like that. Just the 4 of them share a house rental. We were supposed to attend a Kappa Sigma party, I think. The house and the campus were about 20 minutes away. After playing a lot of warm-up in our house, we called Uber and divided the cost of the ride. We continued to pregame, which was a surefire way to go wrong. I was pretty much blacked out by the time we arrived at the celebration. I can hardly recall that house's layout. I had never attended a Kappa gathering. Apart from that evening. It's peculiar. My attention span is limited. Starting that evening, I easily recall that there were several fraternity guys gathered in front of the residence. And then I'm reminded of the living room DJ. And about the 2 beer pong tables in the kitchen. I was subsequently informed that I spent a significant portion of the evening chatting in a corner with a random frat boy after we played beer pong together. But after that, no one is aware of my whereabouts. The last thing I could even recall before waking up and falling asleep on the roadside grass is impossible for me to tell you. In a state of confusion, my brain was pounding. I had to be at least somewhat drunk still. Outside, it was completely dark. Apart from the university, I was lying beside a group of trees in a wooded area. The only things up there were the woods and the occasional little town. I wasn't lying in total darkness though. Further down the road were a few light posts. As I felt through my pockets for my phone, I had a complete breakdown when I found nothing there. In addition, my crossbody bag was absent. I was empty of anything. I became anxious. I couldn't check the time or my location, much less make an assistance call. I glanced about my sleeping space, but there was nothing there. I had some dirt on my white shirt, but that was the least of my concerns. I made my way toward the light posts by starting to walk along the road. It was beginning to dawn on me that there were no buildings visible. I was traveling down an odd back road. For some minutes, I rested on the light pole, contemplating my next move. I decided to inquire after waiting for someone to walk by. Aid. It was a lengthy process, though. I stepped out onto the road and tried to attract their attention by flailing my arms and jumping, but it took me at least 15 minutes to detect headlights down the road. The vehicle decelerated and came to a halt beside the roadside. The man inside the automobile slid down the window as I got closer to it. He once inquired about my well-being. I told him I needed a ride because I was lost and without a phone. He motioned for me to come inside, and I did, making sure to express my gratitude. Naturally, he inquired about my situation and how I ended up stranded on the side of the road. I informed him that I had been to a party and that I had woken up at the side of the road. I should not have spoken of anything, looking back. I ought to have been as evasive as possible and kept my vulnerability and total humiliation from this guy hidden. Why didn't I call for help? He inquired. I also informed him I had misplaced my cell phone. The man gave me a dumbfounded look. For the first time, I truly examined his features when I glanced back at him. He was approximately 35 years old. He wasn't the most attractive man. He had a large nose and a thin goatee. I provided my address for him to use at his residence. He entered the address as he was driving. Then I overheard him mutter something. "All right, let's get started." He replied that we were roughly 20 minutes away when I questioned how far away we were. This seemed about accurate. I assumed everything would go according to plan because the frat house was only 20 minutes away from our home. After I got dropped off at the house, Kayla and Deanna would have my stuff ready for me. However, nothing ever goes that easy. The man's voice was soft as he talked. For the most part, the whole time. At first, he was only asking simple inquiries. His quiet voice was almost unsettling in a strange way. For example, why was he speaking in the or in a nearly whispery voice? We continued on the same route for what felt like a long time. I asked him how much farther we had because I was starting to grow worried. He took some time to reply. I answered, "Sir," and he left after hearing me ask the same question again. Not too far. This was incorrect. We were still on the same rural road with nothing but woods all around, even though our house was in the town. Through my peripheral vision, I began to notice that he would glance at me several times as if he were moving his entire head to look at me for a brief moment before turning back to face the road. I was getting sick to myself. He replied, "Yes," when I inquired if he had entered the correct address. Then, as he placed his hand on my knee and began massaging it, he asked, "What color underwear are you wearing?" I pushed it aside and begged him not to hurt me in a frantic tone. He added, "All I want is to get home safely." I said this, "So why would I hurt you again?" He was going to bend across and throw his arms around me when he pulled into the grassy shoulder of the road and put the car in park. However, I didn't permit him. I bolted into the woods after opening the door. I was fortunate enough to have my Air Force One on, so I had no trouble sprinting through the woods. When I lost sight of the car's headlights, I ran just far enough to disappear from view. The man raised his voice for the first time and yelled into the woods. "Where are you now?" "All I want to do is suck in your eyes." I covered my lips with my hands, not only to stop myself from breathing, but also out of sheer terror. I kept waiting until I heard the sound of a car driving away and a door slamming shut. I waited for a few more seconds and then turned to return to the street. Verifying his absence made me feel incredibly powerless. I needed someone else's assistance, but I also didn't want to cross paths with that man again. I waited for another automobile to arrive at the edge of the woods, and eventually one did. From a distance, I noticed the headlights approaching, but I didn't rush out and started waving my arms and screaming until I was positive it was a different automobile. The vehicle stopped. This dude looked a little older than the other one. This time, I took the back seat. I was so riled up that I didn't say much other than responding to inquiries on my situation. He inquired. Thank goodness, I was dropped off at the residence by this man. By this time, it was around 4 a.m., and my buddies were still up, anticipating my arrival. My luggage and phone were taken by them. If I didn't return before dawn, they were thinking about calling the police. Nobody knew who I had departed with or where I had landed. On the road's shoulder, I was with a boy who says he wasn't the one who went with me. There's no conclusive evidence that I ever left with anyone. However, that still doesn't explain how I fell asleep on the road's shoulder. After that night, I drastically reduced my alcohol intake, and I vowed never to find myself in a situation where I have to hitchhike again. I don't know why, but a few months ago, during our freshman year of high school, I decided to accompany my friend Michael to a house party he was attending. Michael was able to pull some strings, so even though I wasn't invited, I accepted the invitation. I decided to go with it, knowing that I wouldn't be able to drive. Michael told me to leave my phone in the car when we got to the house late at night. I was confused when he stated that I might lose it or that someone I don't know might try to take it from me while I'm not looking. I just nodded, and we left. Of course. The car and followed Michael into the backyard or house where the celebration was being held. I looked around the backyard and observed people in small groups conducting a variety of things, including drinking, smoking, and maybe even using narcotics. I had been urged by Michael to go greet a few people. I had way too much to drink because my vision was so blurry after a few hours. I approached the home and needed assistance, so I leaned against the wall. While I was doing this, I became aware that my watch showed that it was either midnight or 1 in the morning. I knew it was time to go, so I went out to find Michael. I searched the yard for him, even though I was dying to go to sleep, but I couldn't see him. Upon inquiring with several others, none of them mentioned having laid eyes on Michael. I reached inside my pocket to feel for my phone since I had chosen to call Mike to find out where he was, and when I discovered that I had left it there, I silently hated myself. Michael's vehicle. Along with him, it vanished. I recalled that my house wasn't too far from this house, so I knew there was only one way to get home, by foot. But since the night was cold, I considered fall. I didn't know anyone else who could help, so I was just pleading with someone else to take me home. I decided to go home alone in the dark, so I stayed with my plan. When I reached the main section of the street, I continued walking and lazily began thinking about a variety of different things, like why Michael had chosen to leave me alone at the party. I knew I had had too many drinks when I started to stumble down the street and felt lightheaded and dizzy a few minutes later. Or why I gave in to Michael's ridiculous suggestion to leave my phone in his car to prevent myself from being able to call him or anybody else. I began berating myself for being so irresponsible about my drinking, knowing that I shouldn't have even gotten wasted. I was growing tired of walking on the side of the road, so I stopped and folded my arms across my chest tightly to stay warm. Then, I realized that I could hitchhike, so I stuck out my thumb and extended my arm in the hopes that someone else would see me. A few automobiles sped by me as I watched. They refused to give up. And as the minutes passed, I began to feel anxious, believing I would have to walk all over again. A few automobiles were passing me at this point in the morning, past 1 o'clock, but none of them were stopping. They were either unaware of me or didn't give a damn. I paused and considered walking home once more, but I knew it would be too difficult in my inebriated state. The gray truck halted in front of me while I was still holding out my thumb, and I grinned as I staggered in the direction of the car. When the window rolled down, an elderly, bearded man asked if I wanted a ride. I said yes, and he told me where my house was. Afterward, feeling appreciative of the ride, I got into the vehicle. The man tried to strike up a conversation with me as we were driving along, asking me about my past and what had happened. I was unable to carry on meaningful conversation with him, though, and all I could manage to utter were low mumbles and grunts. I began to feel nervous as we rounded the corner to my neighborhood and left the party behind. I had the impression that there was something off about this man for some reason. I told the man that we had just driven past my house and that I felt compelled to leave because of my gut feeling. Suddenly, we passed past my house. But I was too inebriated to move, so I couldn't. The man turned to face me and I realized he had a sinister expression on his face just as I was about to tell him to let me out before we went too far from my house. The man grinned darkly and continued, "You know, you shouldn't be drunk when you're hitchhiking because you'd make a very easy target." Before the man could do any more harm to me, we both heard a loud siren behind the car and then a flashing red and blue light flood. I had no idea what the man was trying to accomplish when he leaned over and began massaging my leg. That night they jumped with excitement inside and I understood there were police. I was able to leap out of the car and run as quickly as I could because the man became frightened and stopped unlocking the doors. A policeman came over to me and I told him the whole event. What became of it? Me. Unfortunately, the policeman said nothing unlawful had occurred at that time. Informed me that he was searching for a person who had allegedly stolen stuff from a store and was driving a gray vehicle. I was just relieved that the policeman stopped the car, even though I'm not sure if it was the man who picked me up or someone else. After I was given a ride home by a police officer, I made the decision not to drink to the point of intoxication. Even when having a great time, I now understand how important it is to exercise responsibility and maintain awareness of my surroundings. I was traveling home from my job at the late-night diner on a rainy night, where I work. At work, the shift was quiet. I knew I would have to take melatonin when I received it because I was still oddly energetic. House. I was traveling the same old route, which is a beautiful road by day and mostly deserted at night with few light posts. There are sporadic instances. There are small parking lots with adorable shopping centers or family-run eateries interspersed with vast expanses of space. And by emptiness, of course, I mean the forest. A woman was standing outside in the rain with her arm outstretched beneath a light post as I passed one of the aforementioned deli's parking lots. I was being waved down by her. Realizing it was a little older woman, maybe in her mid-50s, I slowed down. This woman was really thin and quite tall, maybe 5'11" or 6 feet. I shouted as I rolled down my window, "Are you in need of transportation?" She approached the front door and swung it open. "How much of a champion am I?" She replied, "Just up the road to town," when I asked where she was going. She was so drenched that she ruined my car. However, I consider myself to be a kind person, and I couldn't bring myself to leave another woman out in the bitter rain. Picking up a random male, though, would be a different matter entirely. The woman appeared pleasant, but as I observed her during our conversation, I discovered that she was missing a few teeth, which was unsettling. Now, I had to question if she was homeless. She didn't have a homeless person's smell or appearance. However, the rain was drenching her and her attire, possibly covering her hair and briefly dulling all sense. So wet that the water may have weighed down and straightened what would normally have been disheveled, unruly hair. In any case, the woman never once seemed menacing and was beaming the entire time. When we arrived, we saw a gas station on one corner of the crossroads. I parked my car close to a pump. "Fill up, might as well." I inquired if she had any inner desires. I was doing my best. Well done on their part. Weak. No thanks, honey, she replied. I entered to pay the host for the visitors and to get some spiked seltzer. Given that the weekend began tomorrow, the woman was gone by the time I returned to my car. The gas station lot was small, and I quickly scanned it. She had vanished. Somewhere she must have run off. I felt a little sorry for her, as though she were a lost and defenseless woman. However, I was also a little relieved. I started my SUV after filling up the tank. Traveling home. Upon returning home, I entered my apartment right away. It is located on the first floor of a two-family home. The front door into the level was typically left unlocked, but the two doors leading to each flat were secured. There is a tenant upstairs and I live there. I opened the door to my flat and got out of the rain. I placed the coverlets onto the countertop. I tried to go to bed after taking a melatonin as I wasn't that exhausted yet. That night, though, I was having trouble falling asleep even with the melatonin. My thoughts were kind of running away from me. I was thinking a lot about the woman I had picked up earlier and what had happened to her. I wish I had been more watchful before going to sleep, since there were times when I thought I heard faint sounds coming from outside my bedroom, but I just wrote them off as the upstairs tenant boy's noises. Normally, when I take melatonin, I sleep through the night like a baby, so I would never wake up in my dark bedroom. I awoke feeling sleepy and quite thirsty. As I was getting my water from the table next to my bed, I heard and observed movement across the room. I noticed a figure hunched over a clothes dresser in the corner of my bedroom, their legs crossed. It had to be a hallucination for them. I gave a furious shake of my head and made strange noises. I even gave myself a self-slap, and the person in the corner got up and left the room. I refrained from screaming. I said nothing at all. I was shocked when I sat in bed. The fact that the figure vanished and there was not a sound coming from the outside of the room made me temporarily doubt my sanity. Following this, there were no footsteps or door shutting sounds. Reaching for my phone, I dialed my father. Why I was phoning so late confused him when he picked up. When I told him what I had just witnessed, he remarked, "Trish, you most likely had a night terror." I continued to wake up, so I talked to him on the phone before leaving my room and turning on the lights in the living room outside. It was a compact area. They searched over the entire area and could ensure that nobody was present. I slept with the bedroom door locked that night, even though I was beginning to think that maybe I was just having a hallucination. I had a cup of coffee and got dressed for the gym when I woke up. As I opened the foyer door, I became aware that my heart had already been opened. I went outside to my car and opened the back door to put my gym bag in the back seat last night after realizing it was real and making sure no one was inside. That's when I noticed the damp, yellow-brownish stains all over the back floor and the missing blanket I usually had there. I felt like screaming or crying. I worked it out. Last night, as I was at the gas station, the woman crept into the rear seat. My flat door was either accidentally left unlocked by me or she managed to unlock it in some way. Frantically, I contacted my dad again, asking him for advice. He stated, "Verify that nothing was taken, and if it wasn't, there really wouldn't be any use in calling the police." Only my blanket from the car was missing when I looked around the house. I didn't go to the gym that day. I spent some time hiding out in my flat. I was simply really disturbed after that. After that month, I got a new location to reside in because I didn't want to stay there for too long.